Hi, once again, everybody. Welcome back to the Commstock channel. I'm Marlin Bohling with you. Always a pleasure to have you on board with us as we talk about all things ag related. Well, today, my very special guest is Matthew Kruse, the president of Commstock Investments, who happens to be kind of on assignment, I guess you could say. Matthew happens to be in Brazil. Now, there's a couple of reasons why you go down to Brazil. One is to look at the crops. Of course, you have a better reason there. You might explain how it is you ended up in Brazil this week.
Well, some people head south for the winter, Marlin. I just keep going south, just keep going a little bit further. So, no, we spend a few months out of the year down here is with my wife's family, and they have a farm in the state of Minas Gerais, and so I would say it's not too far from the center of the country, but the Brazil, the way they lay out the maps, they consider it the southeast part of the country in Minas Gerais, and so there's a lot of corn and soybeans. It's probably more known for coffee production in this particular region. So, but yeah, I came in this weekend and haven't had a chance to get a good crop tour yet, but they did finish the soybean planting on Thanksgiving Day. So, so they everything got in on time, and the little bit that I've seen from the road looks really good. They're getting good rains, and if anything, it could maybe use a little bit more sun, actually, because they're getting quite a lot of rain.
You know, in the past, you and I have talked about our weekly updates on Brazil and their growing season, and they had a rough start. They were, 2 or 3 weeks behind on their planting, but then they seemed to have caught up in a hurry by the time they got to the end of the planting season. Did they make it under the wire? I mean, do you think the crops are going to be okay now?
Yeah, I think so far everything is very good. We've talked in the past. There was one commodity trader that said he had a hard time thinking back to a year where everything looked as good as it did at this time of the year. And obviously there's a lot of growing season left. December and January are still very critical months, but it's starting out, it's doing really well. And so it was a little bit late, maybe only a week late starting out, but it quickly caught up. There are places in Mato Grosso where they're concerned that they planted like major regions very quickly, like within 2 weeks. And so they're concerned about being able to harvest it. It's all going to be ready to harvest at once. But being that they were behind schedule and they wanted to get the second crop corn in, they rushed it as quickly as they could. And so there's parts where it was planted very quickly in a very narrow window. But yeah, overall, it's still doing well.
Let's go ahead and take a look at the weather as it stands there right now. And in Brazil, this is apparently your outlook for as of Monday coming up. This will be on December the 9th. Explain on the map where you are and how this affects the overall production there, corn and soybean.
Yeah. I don't know if you maybe can't see my cursor, but I'm kind of in that. There's like a little square right in the center of the country. That's basically their capital of Brasilia, and I'm probably a little bit southeast of that yet. About right there, more or less. That's about where I'm at. So I'm quite a ways from the Amazon and Mato Grosso yet, but there's a lot of grain production here as well. And so this is a weather anomaly, kind of showing the first week here of December and what the weather is showing. And so they're still in that center west region, Mato Grosso, especially into southern Brazil. It's showing pretty solid rainfall, especially in the southern part of Brazil. It leans a little bit drier in the northeast again, like we've been talking about in the past. It doesn't mean they're not getting rain. It's just maybe a little bit below normal and kind of leaning a little bit drier than what they like. What kind of caught my attention was you move out into the second week of December, and that dryness expands quite rapidly, and it starts to spill over in the Mato Grosso and obviously the red areas is showing where it's falling much further below, almost like 40-50% below what the average rainfall is. And so I don't know at what point what the market is going to quite think of that yet. I think it's pretty sensitive, obviously, to the weather going on there. And so I think it should give us maybe a little bit of a rally, just depending on how severe this is. I'm not saying that, oh man, there's some dryness, and the crop is going to be a disaster or anything like that. This could be very short lived, but I think it could spark a little bit of a rally, depending on how severe it is. We'll just have to see. But you see in the south there, I mean, they're still getting a lot of rain in that blue there. So it's a pretty stark contrast from north to south. But again, takes us out through December 17th. And obviously the more you go out, the less accurate it is. But, this is kind of, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. You can see it even extends over into Argentina and in Paraguay, get a pretty good rainfall there as well.
Okay, so that sets us up for that. Now, the way the markets have been acting recently, it seems like soybeans have been testing long-term support. Today, they seem to be holding that. But if this would come to pass, you're talking about 2 weeks out here on this latest weather map here. How much rally potential is there when, I mean, we're really looking at a big Brazilian crop this year, right?
Yeah, I mean, the market's been kind of moving in a downward wedge. I think in January contract, the support levels around that 976, and that's a very important level that we've been at for a while now. So we really need that to hold firm. I could see us, in the short term. Last month we had, before the November WASDE report, we had rallied to 1040, almost 1050, somewhere in there. I don't have the chart in front of me, but so I could see us possibly rallying back to that, depending on how severe this dryness is potentially in mid-December. But unless if there isn't much to it, if that dryness doesn't have much legs to it, I don't see the rally extending much further than that, and it may not even get that far at all. And so the way that the charts don't look very promising, like I said, if rain comes back in later in December, I think we're probably going to break below that 976 support level, and that would kind of open the door to the low nines, unfortunately. And so we'll just have to see as the weather unfolds. I think that's obviously the biggest factor. Some of the we've been setting new crush records in soybeans, and that's on day to day has maybe provided some support in the market, but it doesn't last very long. The market looks past that to how the weather's going in Brazil again, and kind of gives back those gains. And so, but we've got a little bit of support today. I think as we get later into the week and the market keeps looking at that mid-December dryness, it might give us a little bit of a rally, and might be a good point to maybe make some additional sales.
One thing that has always been kind of a concern, or something to watch anyway, on the part of a lot of traders, is the currency exchange rate. How is Brazil's currency comparing to the U.S. dollar these days?
Well, it's been weakening in Brazil as the U.S. dollar has been strengthening. And you kind of see here on this graph what it's done. Brazil's not had a good relationship with its currencies. They've been through several different currencies in the last 50, 60 years. And this currency there, the real, they didn't start using until the late 90s. And so it's a relatively new currency. COVID really hurt things a lot, devalued the currency. It shot up from 4 reals to the dollar up to over 5 in a short amount of time. And now they're having a lot of problems paying all that debt back from COVID. The government spending is too high. Commodity prices are lower, so they're not bringing in as much tax revenue. And so just here last week, it shot up, created a new low basically, and went over 6. And I think we're still trading over that today. We're over 6 reals to the dollar. Now, there's good and bad to that. For the farmer, it's probably mostly good, the Brazilian farmer, I should say, because it makes their soybeans or their grain worth more in local currency, because everything is dollarized, right? The soybeans are a globalized, dollarized commodity. And so if you're getting 5 reals per dollar right now, you're getting 6 reals per dollar. And so that's basically, it's create a little bit of a rally. And that's probably the only reason that it still incentivized soybean planting as much as it did this year, despite low commodity prices. And I think it's also helping to prop up corn prices domestically as well, to the point where, before, just a month or two ago, I was thinking, corn acres maybe were going to be down. And now I think they might be interested in ratcheting those back up again. And so at this point, it's not going to make any more difference to the soybean acres because they're wrapping up planting, but I think it still could make a difference on them looking to maximize their second crop corn acres.
You talk about corn in Brazil, and that is a big wild card, but what about corn production in Argentina? Have you heard anything in that regard?
Well, the planting is going very well there. However, just for different reasons, like a lot of insect pressure, they've reduced their corn planted acres by like 20%, below 20 million acres. I think it's like the lowest that they've planted in the last 8 years. Despite that, though, they're still looking at an overall production close to what they had last year, just because they're looking for a rebound in productivity. They think they're going to get better rainfall this year and get a better handle on controlling some of their insect issues that they had last year. And so, but yeah, that's so far, I think the conditions there are very good. We just showed you the rainfall charts where it looks like for at least through kind of mid the third week in December, rainfall is very good in Argentina. And so I don't see any change there. If anything, it could probably let up a little bit in some areas. But so it's been a big change. But they have a very long growing season and planting window. So, long ways to go yet.
Have you heard any recent activity about Chinese demand of South American production this year?
I mean, it continues to stay strong. There had been a lot. The ag media has made a big deal about, President Lula of Brazil kind of cozying up to China's President Xi and developing those trade relationships. And obviously Brazil is an export-driven country. They're producing a lot of things that China needs. And so they're very keen and interested in solidifying those relationships with China. And China, of course, wants to buy, it seems like, everything that Brazil can produce. And so they don't have kind of the political, challenges and discourse, negativity that we maybe have with China. And so they're, for the most part, they're just trying to ship to China as much as they can. And it's interesting when you drive through parts of rural Brazil. I mean, you'll see large grain bin sites and co-ops with Chinese letters and symbols on them. And it's kind of unusual. You wouldn't see that in the United States. And so it's China setting up their own operations and buying stations in the major growing regions and basically buying it right at the source and then shipping it out directly back home to China.
Obviously, it's been a pretty rough year for U.S. farmers in 2024. Income levels dropped significantly. The market prices dropped a lot. But conversely, how are Brazilian farmers faring here in this particular year of 2024?
I think they've had a rough go, too. I mean, it's not too dissimilar to what's going on in the United States. I think a lot of it comes down to doing good marketing. And, they don't have some of the same tools that we have that we can utilize, with different puts and options like we have in the United States. They don't have the same risk management tools at their disposal, I should say, as we do back home. But they're getting a little bit of, I think now with they're having a rally in their domestic, for the reasons that we talked about. Their exchange rate is provided a little balance. And so they have a shot at profitability, maybe a little bit more than what we're experiencing back home. But I'm looking forward to next year already, and kind of I'm starting to work on my seed and chemical orders, and I'm expecting those to come down, at least the chemicals. I don't know about the seed because it's, the historically, back in 2019, these prices wouldn't be considered so bad. It's just that our cost of production has shot up tremendously, and we need that to kind of come back into reality, because our cost structure for 2024, we basically needed $5 corn, $11 beans to make that work. And so if the cost structure comes down, I mean, maybe 450 corn isn't such a bad thing if our costs can come down. And so that's what we kind of need to happen.
You mentioned a while back that for a farmer to, let's say, sell some soybeans that they have in their possession, in their inventory, the process works a little differently in Brazil than it does here in the U.S., doesn't it? You mentioned that they don't necessarily just pick up the phone, call their local elevator and say, hey, I'm going to haul in 5,000 bushel or something. You might explain that, how that works down there.
You could do that, but a lot of people use physical grain brokers, and it could just be one guy, just working in his home office on a cell phone, just brokering grain. He'll work with several different farmers to build a lot more volume, and then negotiate with the different grain trading companies, and then he gets a cut of the sale of that. That's pretty common in Brazil. I would say especially on the corn, probably more so than the beans, actually, because beans are their cash crop here, and so if I wanted to sell my entire crop of soybeans, let's say I had 300,000 bushels of soybeans, I mean, I could call up Bunge or Cargill and just sell the whole crop in one phone call. And it's harder to do that with the corn. Now, maybe with some of the more corn ethanol plants coming online, that'll change, but it's still, I think, a little bit, not as many big buyers everywhere. Those corn ethanol plants aren't everywhere yet. And so, especially where I was at in Bahia, that was the case. Like a lot of small and mid-sized buyers, buying 20,000, 50,000 bushels at a time. And so you couldn't just sell the whole crop. You had to do it. So that's why a lot of farmers like to work with these physical grain brokers. It's pretty common.
Is that something that you think could maybe catch on in the U.S. or not?
Oh, I think if it was going to catch on, it probably would have happened already. I don't know. I think there's part of it's because there's probably not as good transparency in Brazil as well, and there's a little bit more price haggling or everything. I tend to think that the price transparency is quite a bit better in the United States. In general, the co-ops or whoever, announce their prices, and that's what it is. Now, if you have a lot of volume, depending on the time of year, you could give them a call and say, can you give me a nickel better or something like that? And it might happen. But, 9.5 times out of 10, I feel like, what you see is more or less the price.
Well, Matthew, always a pleasure to talk with you. I'm glad you made it down there safely. All the best to you and the in-laws.
It's not going to be a white Christmas here where I'm at.
All right. Well, you take care. Thank you all. Hopefully talk with you next week. That's Matthew Kruse, president of Commstock Investments. And that'll do it for this episode. Again, we encourage you to like these videos, subscribe to the videos when you click that bell icon down below, and make sure you share these videos with others as well. For producer Brianne Hendrickson, I'm Marlin Bohling. We'll catch you next time right here on the Commstock channel.